Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And thank you for coming out to our third community engagement event. My name is Brenda Harvey Williams, and I have the pleasure of serving as one of the assistant city managers for the City of Pasadena. We have a very full program for you this morning, and we are so appreciative for you wanting to come out and learn about what we are doing as a city. And when I say we, I mean each of us as staff members of the city organization and each of you as members of the community to shape what will become of that ditch, that stub, that gulch, that scar that is in our community right now. So I do very much thank you for coming out. And I do want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, restrooms. Restrooms are through the galley, and in the back, you will see both. Just continue towards the back. You will see both men's and women's restrooms. Also, here in the sanctuary, we want to be respectful of our host, Friendship Pasadena Church. They ask for no food or drink other than water in the sanctuary. So please don't try to sneak something in. I know some of you just thought about doing that. No, only water in the sanctuary. This is a church. God is watching. But to start us off this morning, and because we are so grateful to be in this wonderful, beautiful, historical edifice that did survive the destruction that happened in this part of town. Unfortunately, their leader, Pastor Smith, was not able to be with us, but we do have to welcome us here to the church this morning, Elder Marcus Williams, and I just would like him to come up and share a few words with us. Elder Williams.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say welcome, felicitations, and greetings. There is so much history in this edifice. We are one of the last, if not the very last edifice that is doing or what we were built to do, and that is to provide the prayers, the spiritual uplifting for the community. I'm going to read something real quickly to you. This is from our pastor. It says, "Please convey my apologies to the 710 folks tomorrow and my complete commitment to the process of repatriation and restorative justice. Reiterate that we are the last reminder of a once thriving community of African-American families and businesses." Indeed, I need to say that this is also a brown community also. So we thank you. We hope that the social justice that we seek comes about, and that families and businesses are once again given what is deserved to them. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Williams. So, as you all know, we are here to learn about this process that we are doing to reconnect Pasadena. We have this divide in our community, and we want to bring it back together. And we want to know what it is that we're going to put there. Is it going to be housing? Is it going to be parks and open space? Is it going to be commercial? What will it be? And that's where we need all of your input. We have been doing a lot of work getting to this point, and a lot of you have been at a lot of our previous meetings. So we're going to learn a lot this morning, and I want to get started just by introducing our panel members to you. So we have some experts who have been working on this and working with the community, and I think I'm going to start right here on my right, your far left, with this young man and have him introduce himself. Yeah, that's you. That's you, Vaughn.
I thought, is this working? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Louder. I'm Vaughn Davies. I'm an architect and urban designer. Been working with the community and this team with Perkins Eastman, and delighted to be sharing our ideas with you today.
Keep going, right? Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's David Granis. I am a consultant to the City of Pasadena. I live and work here in Pasadena and have for decades. and I'm very grateful to be part of the community and part of this effort. I've had the opportunity and privilege of working with this great team, but also have served the city in the past in such ways as bringing the I still have to call it the Gold Line Light Rail Line here and a few other projects like that. But this has been a really wonderful process, getting that property back into the hands of the community so that we can reconnect our city.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate, and I'm a planner and a project manager. I'm project manager for this broad physical plan team that I'll be presenting today. I have about 20 years of experience working on large-scale projects, really thinking about complex projects at a range of different scales. And I actually got my start in Vancouver, BC, with a little project called Southeast Falls Creek. Over to you.
Thank you, Kate. My name is David Reyes. I've been with the city about 13 years. I've served with the community's the Planning and Community Development Department, as well as one of the city's assistant city managers for a couple of years, and I'm currently the general manager for water and power.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Page. I'm the Planning and Community Development Director for the city. I have been with the city for 25 years. This is my 25-year anniversary. So it's just long enough that you can maybe blame me for things that you don't like and give me credit for some of the things that you do. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. And we do have one more panelist who will be coming up later, and if he could just stand for us. But we have Deepak Kaushik from Itiris, who is our transportation consultant. So thank you, Deepak, but you'll get to know him a little bit better in a few minutes. We have a schedule for you this morning that we wanted to show. And if you are a stickler for time, you'll see that we're already a little bit behind, but we're all friends in here and we can be flexible with our schedule, right? I'm going to need somebody to nod and say, yes, you're okay with that. Thank you. Thank you. You're such a forgiving crowd. I love you. So what we're going to try to do this morning is explain to you how we got here. We're going to talk about physical planning that we're doing in terms of mobility, also planning that we're doing in terms of land use and design. We're also going to talk about a little bit about history and restorative justice, share with you next steps. And then if you have some questions, we'll be over in the galley. You can see if you didn't get the opportunity, we have a lot of boards up with a lot of more information, and all the panelists will be available to talk to you and answer any additional questions you may have. And speaking of questions, if we can go to the next slide. We are going to be doing some interactive. You should have hopefully you got instructions when you came in and a QR code. We're going to be doing some live polling, asking you some questions so we can get your feedback and your thoughts on things. And when when that happens, our QR code will come up and you can point your camera at the QR code, touch the button, and then vote for us. We also, if you have questions, you should have also been given a question card. If you have any questions you want to write down, we are more than happy to also address those questions. And if you didn't get a card, we have folks who will be handing those out and also collecting those from you. And if we could go to the next slide, we want to start off just by giving a big thank you. Thank you to our community for getting us to this point. And I'm going to just also let you know that our city manager, Miguel Marquez, very much wanted to be here this morning, but wasn't able to be here. But he wanted to give a thank you, and I'm going to hand off to David Reyes in just a moment to share what Miguel wanted to share with you this morning. But also before I do that, I haven't seen any, but I did want to acknowledge any of our elected officials if they are here, if our mayor or any city council members are here. Okay, not yet. So if they come in, I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to stop the program and introduce them because we do want to be respectful. Oh, wait. I can't see that far. No, someone's waving to me. Hi. School board. Oh, yes, we do have. We are grateful to have Patrice Marshall McKenzie here, a member of the Pasadena Unified School Board. Thank you, Patrice, for coming out. and for bringing your mother with you. I also want to acknowledge members of our 710 Reconnecting Communities Advisory Group. These are 16 members of our community appointed by our city council to oversee this process. So if we could have our advisory group members please stand and be acknowledged. Connell, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Remy. Thank you, Mick, who didn't stand up. Thank you, Tina, for standing up late. Anyone else? I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, thank you so much. But let's really start and get into it. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. So I'm going to hand off to David Reyes to start us this morning.
Thank you, Brenda. And again, on behalf of the city manager, Miguel Marquez, I think there were really two messages. One, we wouldn't be here without the hard work and dedication of so many residents of Pasadena fighting for so many years, not only to stop the 710 expansion, but also to help us with the relinquishment. And so in August of 2022, we did officially get the property back. It now does belong to the city of Pasadena. And so he wanted to pass along his thank you, his sincere thank you and gratitude for all of the hard work and many, many years of fighting by our residents here in the city. And then secondly, we're right where we're supposed to be. One of the things I learned in my years in the planning department here is that process is important in the city of Pasadena, and nothing happens without the input of our residents. And so there are some folks that we've heard from in the community that have felt like the project is done. We've decided what the project will be, and this is all just we're going through the motions. And we've also heard that we've done nothing with respect to moving the project forward. And as many of you know, the planning process takes a lot of time. And this is 50 acres, and this is 50 acres of important property in the city that has a lot more considerations than just trying to figure out land uses, right? There's an ugly history here in terms of what has happened in the past. There's also the topography, and there's also thinking about the future of Pasadena as we go forward. So the planning process is extremely important, and we're here to share this morning and maybe into this afternoon a little bit where we are and then where we're going. And so those are really the two messages. Thank you. And we are, as city staff, we are working for you, and we are right where we're supposed to be in that process. And I guess I'll just roll right into sort of how we got here. Again, I mentioned August 2022 was the relinquishment, and I was lucky enough to be in the city manager's office at that time, and was helping then interim city manager Cynthia Kurtz, along with some others, as we started thinking about, we now have the land back, what are we going to do? And then Miguel arrived shortly afterwards, and we started thinking about how important community was. Brenda mentioned the task force, the 16-member task force. That was an important first step in terms of getting community engagement and community involvement. And really what we were looking at as we put this together was trying to develop this vision plan, right? This is not a project. We're not here to select a project, but rather a vision plan about what we'd like to see. What are some options? How would we like to see the city grow? And how would we like to reconnect the fabric of our city, which has been torn apart? And so that planning process that we've talked about, we really wanted this to serve as a foundation as we move forward. And we wanted to look holistically. I think on the screen there are 7 points that you see, but we really wanted to try to look at this stage at all of those different factors. And that's engagement across the city and looking out into the audience. I am seeing that. This is really a diverse cross-section of our community that I see this morning. And then really to try to understand what restorative justice means in the context of the ditch. What does it mean going forward for the vision plan? And then what does it mean to acknowledge what happened? And then going forward, what does it mean in the development of the new plans? And restorative justice means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And we as a community need to decide what it means for us for this project. And then we really wanted to understand the data, like what was in the ditch? Who was in the ditch? What kind of buildings what type of institutions, what type of homes, apartments, who was removed. And that data collection, we really couldn't have done that just by itself, but had to do it in the context of looking at the 210, of understanding redlining at the time, of understanding what the land use situation was, but then really getting back to the ditch, right? And what was going on there, and then really having actual data. So we've hired some consultants and we'll be talking about what we found there. The economics are an important part of this, meaning we know that the infrastructure that it's going to take to actually build 50 acres of new community is going to be really important. And we can't do it in the context of a silo. We have to think about the project economics. We have to think about the climate and resiliency. The city council has given us goals with respect to carbon-free energy. So do we have room for solar? Do we have room for any battery storage projects? All of those things, as we think about this project, are extremely important. But then at the end of the day, we must consider the land use and mobility together. So the mobility is an important component, right? This is obviously was an extension of the freeway, but it really ripped apart our city. And we've got to put that back together. And that means we've got to figure out traffic flow. And we've got to figure out a traffic flow on and off the freeway in a new way. And we have to think about our neighbors, both in Old Pasadena and on the west side. And then what does that mean? And then how do we reconnect to Northwest Pasadena? So all of those things, like this is really a complex project that includes these 7 elements for sure, but a lot more. And so where we are today, I think, is a lot of data collection. And we've done a lot of preliminary work, but no decisions have been made. And I think today we really want to share with you what that data looks like, where we've been going, and what it looks like to move forward. Because when we move forward, we do need to continue moving forward in the planning phase to try to get to what a project or projects might look like within the ditch. I think with that, I turn over right to Jennifer Page. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I'm just going to spend a few slides and talk about the planning process and how all this comes together. And for many of you that are probably here, I recognize a lot of your faces. You participate in a lot of our planning work. You come to our community meetings, and you're very active and involved in the work that we're doing. And so we want to continue that, obviously, with this process. And I guess if there's a church of planning, the general plan is our Bible, right? So the general plan is what guides everything that we do in planning. We spend a lot of time and energy with the community in building consensus in the general plan. We update it about every 25 years and spend a few years on the updates. The last big update was in 2015. And these guiding principles come from the general plan. And this represents an incredible amount of work from the community to synthesize everybody's thoughts and ideas and concerns and dreams into these guiding principles. And so these are very important. This is where all of our work stems from. And the work that we're going to be doing for this area will be exactly the same. So these guiding principles are going to be the foundation for the work that comes out of the vision plan and the specific plan. And so we just want to share those with everybody so you can see what they are. It relates to land use, it relates to mobility, economics. All of those cover the different aspects of the general plan. And if we could go to the next slide, many of you will probably recognize this map that we work from. And it's not just a map. This is the map that's the most important map that we work from in planning. It's adopted by the city council, and it implements the general plan. And all of these different colors represent land uses. So the yellow is single family, and the light brown and dark brown are multifamily. The red is commercial. There's been a lot of thought and discussion about each one of these areas and what should be in those areas. And we have specific plan areas. And so in the specific plan areas, what happens is the council says, go and do further, more detailed work for those and get really down to a lot more detail, a lot more specifics, which is why it's called a specific plan. And let's create more vision for what we want to see in those areas. And as David talked about a foundation, when we did the general plan update, it's for the entire city. And then when we do the specific plans, we get down into more detail. And then as projects come in, they have to conform to the rules that are in those specific plans. And if you see the area here where the relinquishment is in the ditch, there's nothing there. It's white. There is no general plan vision. There is no foundation. That work has not been done. And so that's the work that we're doing here with our vision plan is we're establishing the foundation. And if you think of it like a layer cake, sometimes I do, the first layer is the general plan. That second layer will be the specific plan. And then the top will be the projects that eventually come in and they build upon all that work that was done. And so there's very deliberate process that goes into each one of those phases. And the vision plan, if we'll go to the next slide, please. The vision plan is going to feed into the specific plan. And so the specific plan is a requirement. If you're going to do a specific plan, there's requirements under the state that you have to include. And it's a legally binding document that you have to adhere to. It establishes the zoning, it establishes densities, land uses. And if you want to change the map or you want to change the zoning, you need to go back through a public process with the Planning Commission and the City Council, and you have to have a public process to change it. So everything that we're going to be establishing when we get to the specific plan will be the legal framework, and that's going to be where we adopt everything, and it's essentially the rules that projects are going to have to conform to. So in this scenario, if there's such a thing as a super specific plan, I'd say this is probably what it is because there's nothing there. We don't even have infrastructure there. And so it gives us great opportunity, but it's also a great challenge. And we have to do a lot more work than we would do in some of our other specific plan areas where you already have a built out urban environment and you're looking to see, is it working or not working? What do we want to change? How do we impact adjacencies? Here you have an area where there is nothing there. And so we have the opportunity to be very visionary, but we also have to do a lot of extra studies to support the vision that we have. And we're going to need to do further economic studies. We're going to need to look at, again, how would those be financed? Something also that's a unique opportunity here is that it's the city's property. The work that we're normally doing under specific plans is the city is making rules for private property. And when a private property owner comes in and wants to do a project, they're going to follow those rules. Well, we have a different opportunity here because it's city-owned property. So, what will our partnerships be and how is that going to work? And so there's a lot more work that has to go into this specific plan. But once we get through the visioning that we're working on with this vision document, and that's not a legally binding document, that's a framework that's setting the stage for the specific plan that will be the legally binding document. And we've all been working interdepartmentally behind the scenes on the vision document. It will get very planning heavy when we get to the specific plans. You'll be tired of seeing me and my staff probably like you may be. We're out in the community a lot and we do a lot of work when we get to the specific plans. And so that's coming. So I just wanted to let people kind of know where we're headed because there have been questions. People have asked me, how is the general plan feeding into this? How are we respecting the work that we've already done in the city to establish those guiding principles, and people want to know that that's going to be carried forward into this area as well. So I just wanted to reassure folks that planning's involved, and we know that we're very aware of the general plan, and that's going to be feeding our work. And we'll come up with some additional goals and policies and visions that are just for this area, and we'll be doing that through some of this work, and we'll be doing that through the specific plan. So more to come from the planning department. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kate, I think, who's going to go into some of the vision and where we're at so far.
Actually, I'm going to start here. Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, guys. Can you hear me now? How's this? I'm not used to microphones. So I found this quote. If you look on the screen, a vision is like a lighthouse, which illuminates rather than limits, giving direction rather than destination. So our job today is really to think about where we want to go together as a community and identify our desired outcomes. So next slide. I'm the project manager, so I get this slide also, which is the schedule. We've had 3 phases of this project. We actually started in 2024 with our discovery phase. And so you've actually heard a fair amount from David and Jennifer about that. I won't go into it, but that's where the consultant team came on board to really try to dive into the ditch and see what the physical policy and transportation framework looks like. Now we're in what we call options and engage. So for this, we're doing a series of tests and findings, schemes and test fits, we call it. You can think about it as a series of stress tests. And then once we finish, probably in the fall, so near upon the end of this phase, we go into what we call document and refine. And so that's when we take the input that we gathered today from our advisory group members, from the various standing committees, we refine what we heard and we document it into a series of recommendations that really do describe these desired outcomes. And that's the vision. And you'll see that little lighthouse pop up every so often just to remind you this is a vision plan. So the next slide, this is, as you heard, our third citywide event. We've had some really fun events previously that you can check out online, lots of materials. Next slide. And during our discovery phase, we really did spend some time to inventory the area assets, to understand the general plan, and to really dive in there to understand the constraints and opportunities. Next slide. And so with discovery, as we heard mentioned already today, we have learned a lot about the history of this unique site. And you can see those boards in the gallery. And there's a series of documents actually that are available online. And Brenda is actually going to walk you through that.
Okay, so one of the first things that it was important to do was to figure out what was in the area before the displacement came. And so as a city, we actually wanted to look at 3 different areas. We wanted to know who was there, what were people, institutions, businesses. And so we hired 3 consultants to do a little bit of different work for us. The first group we hired, or the first group to complete their work, was a group we hired out of UCLA, and they looked at racial segregation in Pasadena and the role of the freeway development and institutional mechanisms. So what was it back in the 1960s, 1970s that caused a lot of our segregation, and actually prior to that? And we have this amazing study completed for us by UCLA, and all of this information is available on our website. And if you need to know how to get there, we'd be happy to show you how to do that. Next, we wanted to document what was in the area, and we hired consultants by the name of Architectural Resources Group to tell us actual numbers. And I'll ask that we go to the next slide, and I could just give you a snippet of that. In terms of the numbers of people, the numbers of businesses. So we talk about it. I'm sorry, if we can go back a slide. We talk about this. Thank you. Let's stay here for a moment. In terms of 2 areas, we have the relinquishment area, which was just the area that the state returned to the city, which is bounded roughly by Union to California and kind of Pasadena to St. John, roughly. That's very rough. But then we have a study area because we know that the impacts of what happened in the relinquishment area spilled beyond just the relinquishment area. So we have a little bit larger area called the study area. So Architectural Resources Group, and their report has not yet been published and made public, but it will be next month. There they document, and this is just a little snippet from them. They're telling us how many homes, how many buildings, how many residential, how many commercial. And they took it a step further and actually tried to find out who lived there. You're going to see in their report names, property, who owned the property, and also in some cases, who the renters were, who the businesses were. But we took all this factual data, and one of the things our advisory group wanted and said, that's good information to have. We need that factual data. But can we put a personal spin on it? How did this actually impact people? We want to know the feelings, the emotions, what people went through in this process. And for that, we hired a 3rd consultant called Allegra. And Allegra's owner is here this morning, Suzanne Madison. She's sitting in the front row. Maybe Suzanne just wave her hand for us. And Suzanne put together a documentary called Amplify. She went out, her and her team, and they found people who were displaced. And they asked those people to tell their story. And one of the things she found is it was very difficult and painful for people to tell the story of how they were ripped from their home and all of those emotions. This Amplify documentary is available on the city's website. It is also available on YouTube. So it's widely available. We're also available to give screenings of it. There are some places where it has already been screened. But I do, even just from this one beginning slide, I don't want to call anybody out, but the person whose family is represented up there is here this morning, and I don't want to. Yes, this segment was just a very, very emotional piece about the Grant family and how many properties they owned in this area as a family and could walk to other relatives' houses and what they lost. But because of that, it was important that we take a look at restorative justice. That is one of the elements of this vision plan we're putting together. So if we could go to the next slide. Because people lost something, it's important that they be restored. So one of the things that the advisory group has developed is a draft recommendation on a restorative justice statement. And this will be going to the full city council for their approval because we do want to acknowledge what happened and the harms that were done. So we've come up with this, or I should say the advisory group and the Restorative Justice Subcommittee has recommended this following definition. And I do want to read it to you for those who can't see it. Defining restorative justice, Pasadena focused. Restorative justice is a dynamic process which takes action to repair direct and indirect harms caused by the partial construction of the 710 freeway and other transportation corridors and their broader impact in Pasadena. It will identify, publicly inform, officially acknowledge, respond to, and remedy these injustices through open and responsive engagement with the disproportionately impacted communities. This will ensure the development of community-driven solutions, including non-repetition of harm, integrated through the vision plan design elements for the city council's consideration. And so what we're trying to do is, again, acknowledge the harm and what can we do to address it. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of you may wonder, how can these 50 years, 60 years later, how can we address restorative justice, or how can it be applied to a project like this? So we wanted to share with you some of the ways that this can be done. It's, first of all, a project process. So the way that we deliver the process, the project, and even the fact that we're including the community and a broad sector of the community in the planning process. The city is not sitting over in City Hall deciding what will go there. No, we are including all of you, and this is a part of restorative justice. We're also looking at the future physical design, what the project might include in the public realm, be it memorials, public spaces, or other features that acknowledge what was done. Because if we don't acknowledge and recognize our past, we're doomed to what? Repeat it, yes. And we don't want to do that. So another thing we're doing is we're looking at future programming. What are the project uses? Should there be affordable housing in here? As a city, we do have a standard of new homes and new residential developments. 20% are required, 20% of the units are required to be affordable. So this is something we're definitely looking at for this part of town, affordable housing or community-based programs and partners. And then we're also looking at targeted investments for impacted communities. And I know that's kind of a broad phrase, but we've not completed, the advisory group has not completed their recommendations in this area. But what they are looking at in a broad sense are perhaps procurement intervention for small businesses and for small business training, for training of members of the community to work on the project and work on aspects of the private sector projects that will be built. So at a very broad base, this is what we're looking at in terms of restorative justice. And again, this work isn't done yet. It's still a work in progress, and we are still meeting, we are still studying, we are still determining what all of these processes could be. But I did want to leave you with the two things we are looking at in terms of restorative justice is both a process focused and a planning focus in terms of restorative justice. And with that, we will move to our next slide, and I will turn it over to Kate.
So thank you, Brenda. I think it's some of those restorative justice elements we just heard about also really complement many of the things that we've been hearing from the broad-based community. And those are the elements that really can guide the ongoing physical plan. So on the slide, you can see in blue some big themes that we'll be talking about today. Reconnection, exploring physical reconnections, especially to the northwest, reducing and mitigating those traffic impacts. And David's going to start talking to us a little bit about that. The freeway has a lot of, impact. Make it nice to walk. Housing, really being responsive to what's there now, those neighborhood assets, applying density carefully, and then that community and economic opportunity, lots there, including a very robust place strategy, places to interact and gather. We heard a lot about intergenerational spaces, about spaces that really help create kind of social cohesion, opportunities to reconnect, green spaces, acknowledging and honoring what happened before and honoring displaced community. And then thinking about how all of that fits together to really create a project that is balanced and that can be built, balancing both the economics and the public benefit. And then, of course, we actually heard a lot about Pasadena being a leader in sustainability. So there's a lot of support for us to really think about both water and power, and David actually brought that up earlier, as well as climate-sensitive design. We've looked at extreme heat, and those are things we're going to talk to you about as we continue. Back to you, Brenda.
What we're going to do now is just ask the panel some questions. I know we've presented to you a lot of information, and you're probably sitting there like, that was a lot of information, and it's hard to absorb. And I even see someone yawning right now. So to break that up, we want to... Hello. Okay. So to break that up, we want to just ask the panel some questions. So this is where I get to be Oprah a little bit. So panel members, for my first question, I'm going to give this one to David Reyes. The vision plan is described as a framework that evolves over time. How do you see this flexibility benefiting Pasadena in the long term?
So I think Jennifer Page spoke about specific plans Jennifer Page spoke about the specific plans and setting forth rules and regulations for future development. None of our specific plans say you have to build a certain type of project. So I think having flexibility in a plan is really important because we don't know what the future holds. And we don't know how long it's going to take to rebuild this area. It's not going to be, we get a plan done and it gets rebuilt the next year. It's going to be done in phases for sure, and it's going to be done over time. And having flexibility in a vision and flexibility in the plan is going to allow not only the community to achieve the goals that they want to see with respect to the ditch, but also the city. The city as a body, as an entity, the city is going to continue. And what do we want to see there for the next 100 years? Having flexibility is going to be hugely important moving forward.
Thank you, David. So, Jennifer, are there lessons from the past planning efforts shaping this process?
Absolutely. I think I look at this in two parts. At the local level and within Pasadena, we spend a very large amount of time on our planning and our planning work. And like I said, it's the foundation for the built environment, everything around us. So it's something that we should be spending a lot of time on and effort and working with the community on. And the benefit that we have in Pasadena is we spent so much time and effort on all the other areas around this that we can look to that for lessons, and we can look to that for things that we think have worked and haven't worked. And you often learn just as much from the things that we don't like and that we don't want to see again as we can for our dreams and our vision of the future. And so we would want to hear from people on both of those. For example, as we've been going through this specific plan work, we heard a lot about the Walnut Corridor, and a lot of people have very strong feelings about the Walnut Corridor and that those buildings are too tall, and there's a canyon effect, and they don't like what is going on there. And 20 years ago, the planning there was to have an urban edge and to bring the buildings to the street and embrace urbanism and really feel like, an urban place. And after we saw some of those projects come into fruition, I think people realized maybe that's not what we wanted, and that didn't turn out exactly the way we wanted it in all of those places. And so you learn from that. We don't always hit the mark, but we learn and we adjust. And so as we go through this process, we want to hear from you on what you like and what you don't like, and where we can take examples from things that you would want to see in Pasadena. We also have to look beyond Pasadena, because we have never had an opportunity here where we have nothing there, where it's raw land and we're starting from scratch essentially. And so we would look then to other communities to see projects where they've had successful partnerships and they've been able to redevelop similar areas. And what do we like or don't like about those things, and how can we bring those over into this area? And I know that Dave Granis and Vaughn have done a lot of work in their specific examples of where we're looking beyond Pasadena, as we should be internationally, at things that we would love to bring over and integrate into that space, but still have it connect to Pasadena and be Pasadena. So it's that balance of being visionary and what do we want to see for this space, but also reconnecting it back to the community and recognizing that just across the block is still Pasadena, and we need to have that all come in seamlessly together. So I think we have a lot of lessons that we'll learn from in that work.
And David Granis, do you have anything to add to that?
Just real quickly, the context here is, we're taking out a freeway, and everything Jennifer said is really, really critically important in terms of community involvement. But it is helpful to know that we have examples of where, not the same way, but where a freeway was taken out, and there was a lot of fear surrounding, gosh, we're taking the freeway out. It's not, the circulation's not going to work, the connectivity's not going to work, etc. Give you a couple of recent examples. San Francisco, the Loma Prieta earthquake, freeway fell down. And the decision was made with a lot of consternation to just not rebuild it. So different than taking it back. We're one of the only communities that's actually been successful in taking back a freeway. But in that case, it has worked quite nicely, and that has reconnected that whole Embarcadero area. Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, there used to be a thing called the Harbor Drive Freeway that ran right along the Willamette River in downtown Portland. And the decision was made to take that out and create Tom McCall Park. He was the governor of Oregon at the time. Not at the time, previous governor. And that has actually created a whole vibrant area on the waterfront where there's housing, there's jobs, there's the OHSU, the Oregon Health Sciences University, et cetera. So I wanted to mention those. Rochester's another one in New York, that we have some ways that we can look at this and say, we got to make this work. And there's some good lessons from some of these areas where it has worked quite well.
Thank you, David. And our final question in this section has to do with restorative justice. What are the outcomes the community can expect from the Restorative Justice Subcommittee's recommendations? And we do have some of those members here. But I think and I'll answer part of that, and maybe David Reyes might want to join me in part of it. But I think the main things that the community can expect are an acknowledgement of what happened, a definition of what happened, the history of what happened, and moving forward in assurance that we will work very hard that something like that won't happen again. And in practical terms, I think that will come out in the physical design of what ends up going there. We will look at the design and the vision plan with that restorative justice lens. What does that mean? It might mean more affordable housing. It might mean some priority given to former residents of the area in terms of housing and owning businesses in the area in the future. It might mean a lot of things, and it hasn't completely been defined yet. But again, the main thing we want to do is acknowledge what happened, remember what happened in the future, make sure it doesn't happen, and also do some restoration to those who were displaced and harmed by what happened. And David, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, there was an old planning commission map that we looked at prior to the freeway going through, and all of the buildings being demolished. And it was pretty clearly identified in that planning commission map this was an area for people of color. And we have folks that were Japanese, folks that were of Mexican American descent, folks that were of African American descent, and certainly there were Caucasians as well. So this was an area that was certainly of color and shown on a planning commission map to be of color. And so we think about that today and what that means for our city. And then what does restorative justice mean in the context of future land uses? And it's not easy. We do see examples from other cities. I think Santa Monica, with respect to the 10 freeway, they did give priority affordable housing options and opportunities for folks that were displaced or descendants of those that were displaced. I think things that are physical and tangible are really, really important. And I think it extends to even opportunities for jobs. And I think it's been mentioned, there's going to be a lot of development here. How do we work to develop an educational base, folks that can actually learn a skill and then put that skill to use, whether it's through construction or an incubator space. So I think that the options and the opportunities are broad and haven't been set yet. And the ideas that Brenda talked about earlier, that's just kind of what the subcommittee's thinking about. The city council needs to be involved and engaged, and the broader community needs to be engaged. There are a lot of really smart people in the city of Pasadena, and I think that together we can probably come up with some really good options that make sense in terms of recognizing the harms that were done in the past and how we might move forward in the future.
Thank you, David. And if we could move to the next slide, we're going to kind of move to the next section where we wanted to start talking about mobility planning. And for this section, most of our slides are going to be presented by David Granis and Vaughn Davies. So I'd like to turn it over to David Granis now so he could just get started.
Thank you very much. So we've talked a little bit about this in terms of mobility and the importance of the coordination between land use and mobility. What's really, really important here, again, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we took a freeway back. That was intended not just a freeway, but a full 3-freeway interchange. And it was designed as freeway to freeway. And that's what cut our community, that's what bifurcated this whole area. But at the end of the day, the mobility planning is critically important to make sure that this works, to make sure that as we take back what was a freeway, that it now functions much more like a neighborhood, like a community. And so next slide, please. There we go. I wanted to make sure and underscore this because some of the people that are out there in the audience that worked on this for decades, and I won't call you out on purpose, but basically what really is important is that we reimagine this, what was a 20th century plan for the 21st century. And Dave Reyes talked a lot about the integration of those 7 components: sustainability, energy, net zero. We need to incorporate all those things. There's not silos here. This is all an integrated, holistic approach. It all has to work together. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this slide, the freeway welcomes you in. Isn't it beautiful? Such a human space, kids at play. The point here is that it was once, and you can see on the boards that are out there, classroom, school kids, there were a variety of things, and we need to put all that back, but we can only do that in a way that creates many more choices for mobility. The freeway really is a one-trick pony. It's a singular way of kind of getting around. You can put some other modes in it, but the reality is it really was designed for a singular purpose. And so we now need to expand that to a much more holistic approach where you, me, all of us have a lot more choices about how we get around. And that's everything. Next slide, please. So this is really what the just an artistic rendering, if you will, of what it looks like. Today the red is really the core freeway components, and the orange are the arterial sidebars of Pasadena and St. John. Really reimagining this as multimodal, reimagining this as a set of additional choices of how we connect and how we get around. And really making sure that this is accessible at a human scale. The slide where I was jokingly saying it welcomes you in, it's not human scale. So what the mobility plan has to do is it has to hit that human scale. And to walk through how that is being approached, I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn Davies.
You can hold on. You can hold on to that one. I'll use this.
Pardon me?
Hold on to that.
Hold on to this. Okay, got it.
So a little bit of expanding what David said, think about the 21st century, but think about the 21st century and beyond. I think, this change that happened so radically with the automobile really happened overnight in the trajectory of how our cities have grown over the years. And so we really need to keep in mind that what we are planning for now still needs to have some flexibility and to be able to move on beyond that to certain forms of mobility maybe we can't imagine today. So, we would never imagine cars would be quiet for many, many years, and suddenly we have a problem with quiet cars. So we need to start thinking beyond that. You're going to see these drawings, diagrams, just to code you in here. Red means freeway oriented, and we're going to start talking about the red as maybe a negative. As it gets to be orange, those are streets that are heavily impacted. They serve the freeway. So today, South Pasadena and St. John, even the crossings on Del Mar and Colorado and going between Colorado and up the hill going west, those are all freeway-oriented streets. They're not particularly nice. They're certainly not easy to cross. And if you do cross over, you have to wait a lot longer for the light to change because it's prioritized towards getting cars in and out efficiently. So we're going to go from red to orange. We want to try and get most of these as green as possible. So you'll see green start to appear in some of the future slides. So this is what we have today. If we can go to the next slide, we've had people say just take out all the red, and then we're going to end up with something different. So we need to start thinking about, well, what does that look like? How do we transition? We can't just do that overnight. We need to plan for this as an incremental change and eventually get to where we want to. But we certainly want to make this serve the local community first rather than the regional. So these streets are our prime target, the orange ones on this diagram, to try and change them from being regional serving to first be local serving. So if you can go to the next slide. And in order to do that, we need to think about, slowing down traffic, about changing the physical attributes of those streets. And you're going to hear us talk a little bit more about complete streets as we move forward in this discussion. But we really want to make sure that we can start getting a lot more of what you see in this diagram of those green streets. In order to do that, we need to start looking at scenarios. And so one of the first scenarios we're looking at here, which is called Gardens and Terraces, really prioritizes the reuse, adaptive reuse, let's call it, of St. John and South Pasadena, and to see what kind of capacity and what alternatives might arise from that. And another option we're going to look at, which is on the next slide, is going to look at adding a new boulevard to this and keeping St. John, keeping South Pasadena, but making them much more local, low-key, so that we can really connect old Pasadena across into the new development, and we really can connect the west side where Maranatha colleges and schools and all of that into the community and make a much more seamless connection to whatever new comes along. But we want to make these streets more well-behaved. So we're not choosing one at this point. We've got scenarios here that allow us to test these. In doing all of this, we have to look at how do we impact or how do we reconnect to the regional system. And as you can see on this, we have far less red and orange at the top of the slide there. We think we can manage to push all of those fast-moving traffic, slow down the traffic much earlier as they come down the freeway or as they're moving along the freeway, get rid of signs that tell people, basically invite you to take a shortcut through the neighborhood, and start to change people's minds over time as we go through this. So a lot of our testing that we're doing today is around these two scenarios, I'm going to say, but they're by no means the only options that we have to move forward with. If you can go to the next slide. The This is when you see them compared to one another. The first one, as I mentioned, was all red. There are 21 intersections out there today. They all deal with freeway, arterial traffic connecting freeways and on-ramps and off-ramps. And that's why it's an unpleasant environment, because none of those intersections have been designed with you as a pedestrian in mind as first and foremost, and making it easy for you to navigate that and making the traffic more well-behaved. We want to be able to move through testing various scenarios to try and get everything green as much as possible. And so you can see in the middle image there, and the one with the number 27 and 23, those are the numbers of intersections. We want to add intersections. Adding intersections slows traffic, gives you more options as a pedestrian or a cyclist or using alternative mobility to make choices about moving east and west across the site and reconnecting the neighborhoods, as well as moving north and south through this neighborhood. So we really want to try and push any of this to as green as possible and as many intersections as possible, so you have those choices. Next slide. And we're going to get a little bit into the weeds here on the character of these, but I'll move fairly quickly through them. The first one, again, we just talked about is really, this is just showing you in detail how many intersections we have that are orange and red. Next. Only when you really make some radical decisions about, severing ourselves from the freeway and reconnecting in a different fashion can we start to become greener and more compatible with pedestrians. So you'll see the legend on the bottom corner there really starts to indicate what the character of those intersections are like, that the streets are narrow enough to be able to navigate, that there are bicycles and pedestrians, etc. And eventually, when you get to the third scenario, the next one, which is adding a boulevard, you get to the 30 intersections. If we can have the next slide. And then in addition to this, there are other levers that we can use to really change the character and nature of this. If we can go to the next slide. We want to think about the area that currently is not in the relinquishment area. So anything north of Union is currently not city-owned. But we want to work with the agencies who are looking at regional transportation and the interface between that and the city to see whether in those blocks we can do something to intercept ourselves and reconnect ourselves and join in that conversation about regional traffic and perhaps a multimodal facility or some kind of transit interceptor that gets people off the freeway and doesn't make them into the city streets unnecessarily. So there are lots of opportunities to make that happen. The next slide is, what does that mean for the character of these streets? Well, this is one of the wonderful streets out there today. So if you walked over a couple of blocks from here, this is what you would see. This is what we do not call a complete street. This is one of those orange and red dots that you saw on the map, where you have literally half a street is developed with residential. Those poor individuals in those homes have to look out on a one-way street with fast-moving traffic, fences, and down in the ditch, if they're lucky, they're screened by some trees, but down in the ditch, fast-moving, noisy traffic, and these little bits of leakage, I'd call them, of on-ramps and off-ramps, and we want to change that character. So the next slide will show you that same location and what that could look like if we started to engage both sides of the street and call this a complete street, where we have framed by buildings on both sides. The buildings meet the streets. There are opportunities for people to live graciously at the sidewalk level with patios and courtyards, not unlike what you have here today already. If you walked out of this door and into the Westgate apartments, you would see people on their patios and streets. You'd be able to walk through paseos. You'd be able to walk through quiet streets. So you've already done that, and we can probably really do it even better. But this is what we mean by a complete street, one where the pedestrians are priority. They're integrated with bikes and cars and peds, and they have gardens and swales that capture water and a beautiful green tree canopy, which Pasadena, I think, is so well known for, to really encourage that throughout.
So we do want to ask, again, our panelists a few questions, and I do want to acknowledge that Deepak from Iteris has joined us, our transportation consultant. So this first question I want to throw out to David Granis. What do you see as the biggest challenges to transforming and recreating the 710 Stub into a walkable, connected neighborhood?
Well, thank you. I think greatly what I've alluded to in previous comments, but I'll recontextualize it a little bit. I think first and foremost, overcoming the fear of changing this from a freeway to something more localized. Now, for the people in this room, that may not be a fear. For others, though, that there are people out there that think the freeway is a great thing and we should reconnect it, right? Not disconnect it. So overcoming that and really focusing on the future and the opportunity of connecting, reconnecting all these neighborhoods, all the destinations in the city, and doing so in such a way that is economically, environmentally, and equitably vibrant and functional. So in short, got to make sure it works, right? But I think that's really the important part, is overcoming the past, focusing on the future, and ensuring that this functionally works and meets the vision, meets the standards, meets the, aspirations of the community, and that can be realized. So I think those variables are quite important.
Right. And we're going to thank you, David. We're going to turn to the next question. We're going to ask Deepak to chime in for us. What is the key reason to include a new street level boulevard in the study area, and why wouldn't you include it?
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. As shown in the map that Vaughn presented, a new street level central boulevard could help intercept, we're talking about removing freeway ramps, intercept freeway traffic to the north, depending on where that is to be determined, and how that would be done. We'll show an example of the potential design later, but intercept freeway traffic on a new central boulevard, allowing St. John and Pasadena to be not downgraded, but essentially turned more into localized streets, as has been talked about, and allow more traffic calming features, whereas right now they take the brunt of traffic to and from the freeway. So that would be one of the benefits to include it. As far as not including a central boulevard, as was shown in the Gardens and Terraces design grouping, it'll allow. What happened here? Not including it would allow for maybe a little more flexibility in terms of pedestrian-only movement. If you don't have vehicular movement down to Central Boulevard, and that area is more opened up for land use flexibility. But so there's pros and cons to each.
All right. Thank you, Deepak. And Vaughn, did you want to add anything else to that?
No, I think we'll expand upon it as we move forward to the next phases.
Okay, excellent. Then we will move to the next slide. And this is the time where all of you can participate with us. Let's get those phones out, people, because we have some questions. We want to get information from you. This is a interactive process with you, not just in this meeting, but also throughout this whole planning process. So based on what you've just heard about boulevards and paseos and about gardens and terraces, do one of those better align with your vision of how to reconnect? If you take your phone out, point your camera at the QR code and respond to the question. A, gardens and terraces. B, boulevards and paseos. C, needs more work. And then I do want to apologize, but our D option, write in an answer, is not working. So if you do have something you want to write in, if you could take the question card that you were given when you came in this morning and write your write-in answer on that, and we will be collecting them. So if you would do that for us, we'll just take a moment to allow you to vote. Boulevards and paseos or gardens and terraces, which one aligns with your vision to reconnect? And we do have someone who's collecting the cards. So if you have a write-in answer, just hold your card up and we will collect that from you.
And as you're answering, some of the things to think about as you're answering that is really about the east to west connections as well. And in Boulevard of Paseo, we actually include a Holly Street extension, and we include a Bellevue extension, as well as Valley Street. So some of what you can see in the image there about the Boulevard of Paseos is really about bringing that traffic in and terminating it a little bit earlier before you get to the Stub, and then adding additional east-west connections as you move through. As Deepak mentioned, Garden and Terraces just provides a little bit more flexibility in terms of pedestrian travel north-south through the Stub area. And you can see that also on the diagram as people are moving, and it's really prioritizing bike peds moving through the Stub and two-way streets on either side.
Okay, and if you look to the screen on your far right, you can see how the polling has turned out. And we have one more person up front wants to turn in a card. So thank you for that. And we're going to do this a couple more times, so keep. So thank you for that participation and that feedback.
How working?
Okay, if you can't read the words on the screen and I can't see them, can
The tally is 47% for gardens and terraces, 38% for boulevards and paseos, 12% needs more work, and other is 4%.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm at an angle where I can't quite see it. This is one opportunity to provide us feedback. Again, you have your card. Please feel free to write anything on that card. And we do have, Ruben, there's one more in the middle, a couple more in the middle where we can collect your cards. And we are just so excited to see you providing us with that feedback. We're going to move on now. So if we can go to the next slide, let's look at how circulation influences form. And now I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn, and he's going to talk about ways to reconnect and make things more pleasant, easier.
Thank you, Brenda. Great. So I'd like to think what we just talked about with the boulevards and paseos and the streets and is really the foundation. The street and block, we call it, is the foundation on which we build the buildings and start to shape the vertical construction of the buildings and shapes and sizes of buildings, etc. So once we settle on what that form is, and we'll still keep using the gardens and terraces as an example and the boulevard to show you what that form making means, but we want to start to elevate the space and start to think about what the buildings look and feel like. The next slide is really just a reminder of the magnitude of the opportunity that you have here. At the bottom, you'll see this ditch from left to right outlined. And shows you the length of a ditch, essentially the study area from Walnut all the way down to California, from left to right. And then the same size, the same area we've outlined on Colorado Boulevard. And you can see what we're talking about from making a city-making point of view. It's as if you're building everything on Colorado Boulevard on both sides from the ditch all the way to the beginning of the Playhouse District. So there is a lot of development there. None of what would have happened there wouldn't have happened intentionally with a specific plan, with a lot of community involvement over time, many architects, many developers, mistakes along the way and having to come back and fix them. But it's a huge opportunity and we should not take this lightly. This is something that you all should participate in because this could be as influential as that image of Colorado, of Pasadena, of what Colorado is for you as a community. It could be as important moving forward for the next generation or generations to come. So that's why the foundational mobility in street and block is really, really important because it's going to set the stage. It's going to create the addresses, the new addresses, like Colorado Boulevard is a great address. We have the opportunity to create a great address on Colorado Boulevard, on Del Mar, on the streets that cross over, as well as the new North-South Street. So I just wanted to share that with you. And so what we're talking about today is this, in the next few slides, is really the scale of that development, how big and how much. So the first slide, the next slide, is really just an illustration that shows you these two scenarios, let's call them side by side. So at the top, you're seeing the one that we shared with the boulevard, and at the bottom is the one that is called gardens and terraces. One of the reasons for adding additional north-south streets in this is in helping to define the form of the city. We know that smaller blocks in cities provide a more guarantee of more walking and connectivity, of lots of nuance, of lots of ways to get through. And that's one of the reasons for showing that. So you'll see the block sizes are a little bit smaller on the one on the top, which is the new boulevard. And the other one has larger blocks. Some people might refer to these as super blocks or larger blocks. The way the mechanism that the city would have then to manage that is to create parcels within that development, parcels that are smaller, that abut against one another, and then define easements within that. So, yes, I'm going to keep moving on. Next slide. And so here you see some of those opportunities that we would have to start to define the east-west connections and get people to move through it, to break up the scale and make it smaller and more intimate as we move through it. So both of these have opportunities to do that. The way that this would unfold and the relationship between the city and the developers would be slightly different to each of the opportunities about how we create those east-west connections and guarantee them, as well as the new north-south connections. But we're really focused on the public realm. I think that's the most important thing about the form making. We should be thinking about what those streets look like, what those plazas look like, what the interfaces on Colorado, on Green Street, on Del Mar, at Holly Street. Does Holly Street continue through, or does it already not connect Holly Street? Being taught to move forward. Yeah. So we get to the next ones are going to be the question.
Okay, get those phones out again. We want to get your input again on what features you think support reconnection. And Vaughn just walked you through what those could possibly be. So if you could vote, and again, remember that option G is not available, but we have more cards if you handed in your card already. But in terms of reconnection, paseos, those walking areas, new streets, public gathering. I'm sorry, let me start off. Would you like to say A, paseos, B, new streets, C, public gathering spaces, D, cultural spaces and memorials, E, active recreation spaces, F, all of the above? Or if you would like to write in an answer, if you could write that on your card, and we have folks in the aisle who will collect those cards. And again, if you need a new card, just raise your hand and we'll get you one of those as well. So we'll just pause for a moment and let you vote.
Okay, so the votes are still coming in. For those who can't read them, I think we've got all of the above is the resounding winner, but I think all of those attributes are ones that we should work towards. I think there's maybe less of an understanding or interest in what the streets do from a form-making point of view, so we'll work to help get that number more balanced. I think the idea would be to kind of get this eventually to be more of a straight line and a balanced idea of what these elements are and how they contribute. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next slide. I'm going to be the one that gets told to rush through all of this, so bear with me. So bringing all of this together, if we can go to the next slide, we want to talk about the context for our transportation, how we're really going to link things together. You really already have a really wonderful urban street and block within the city that does a lot of things for you and brings a lot of transit to the city. And as we think of moving forward, we want to tie all of these together. And I think this diagram really is more of a reminder to us all of what we do have and the opportunities and levers to try and prioritize people using public transit to get around as an alternative rather than doing lots of short little trips, which people are doing right now because they can't get across the ditch. Nobody's going to walk from the west side of Pasadena into downtown. We want you to be able to feel comfortable to get on that microbus or get on your scooter or ride your bike or walk across that ditch, which is really only a 2-minute walk, but today feels so unfriendly and so unwieldy. So everybody should feel comfortable, I think, making it. We want to add to that inventory, which on this diagram, I think you can see there's an abundance of opportunity to do that, whether it's linking microbuses or tying into a regional system of transit or creating a parking reserve or for major events in the city and helping people get from downtown to Pasadena or even to get into Pasadena and have come here as a destination to go shopping and know you can do it without having to bring your car. You can get on public transit and you can walk freely within this greater part of downtown. So we want to think about connecting the dots as we go through this and making it as user-friendly as possible for every mode of transit within the city. And to help us think through that, Deepak, I think, if you can go through the next few slides.
Yeah. Thanks, Juan. Yeah. So our vision, our mobility vision for this project, comes from the understanding that in order to reconnect this community to what it once was, we've got to emphasize tools and strategies to make this a more multimodal transportation area, accessible for all modes of transportation, complete streets like you've been hearing. There's really two answers that we're looking. There's two questions that we want to answer as part of this. And reminder of how we got here was through that relinquishment study that was completed a few years ago, working with Caltrans. And that was more of a fatal flaw analysis. And now we're into the planning phase. So the first question being, how can the city use this area to create a multimodal set of transportation choices to improve access and mobility and safety and connect people to their events of their daily lives. The second question tearing off that then is how can we enhance access and mobility to then reduce congestion, improve safety, and enhance quality of life through this mobility plan. Next slide. So what we're studying right now, we've looked at locations in the area and this general study area that you see off to the right, but we've looked at locations that currently have congestion at intersections and segments, and we're focusing our understanding on where this project's impacts will lie and how those areas will be impacted and how we can improve on those impacted areas in the future through a set of tools, which we'll talk about, because returning this area again to where it once was with the mix of uses and the urban framework is going to take a set of tools ranging from transit tools to complete streets tools, and really just thinking about connection to the freeway and connection to other neighborhoods in a comprehensive manner. Next slide. So with that, it's been mentioned, we have these two buckets of design groupings. There's the gardens and terraces, and there's the boulevards and paseos. But within that, we are looking at variations of links and connections, roughly 10 scenarios between the two of them that involve how we, variations in how we connect to the 210, 134, whether that be through a full intersection or a roundabout, one-way or two-way connections at St. John and Pasadena. So those are variations. Where the actual connection to the freeway occurs, does it occur north of Walnut, more south at Holly, south at Union, vertically, is that at the street level or is that below grade to potentially enhance traffic safety? And then the east-west crossings, which was touched on, a variation of where new east-west crossings such as Bellevue, Holly, Valley have been mentioned across the ditch area that are not obviously crossed today, could be added to various design groupings. And then just the overall lanes and street classifications of all the roads in the study area to function either as local streets or streets that can at least accommodate the projected demand that we're talking about in terms of land use. Next slide. So from that, we have a few early observations. This plan, we've tested, or we're starting to test the land uses as part of the vision plan against these street concepts that have been talked about, and that testing will help us then refine the street concepts and land use plan to provide better mobility for all modes of transportation, which is really what the goal of this is. It's the city's goals as part of the general plan. You can see the little graphic on the bottom just depicts what we're really trying to do is balance growth estimates, the growth of land use with the circulation network. So land use and circulation network as a balance. But as I talked about in the panel question, what we've kind of seen, at least initially, is that the addition of a north-south boulevard could help spread out the traffic by adding some capacity that allows flexibility in how you design St. John and Pasadena, or redesign to be more of a complete streets, slower streets on the bookends there of the project. And that's along with the boulevards and paseos design grouping. And that may give us a stronger approach to build upon. That's what we're seeing, the early observations, but it's obviously very preliminary. Next slide. And so this side is filled with tools in the vision plan. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but general tools to, we say reduce driving. What we mean by that here is kind of reduce it in two parts. Reduce the number of vehicle trips, also reduce potentially the length of vehicle trips in this area and the makeup of vehicle traffic. And that includes a set of tools from these bounding streets, like I said, St. John and Pasadena, serving as slower with more intersections, creating a new boulevard potentially, like we said, more transit connectivity, enhanced pedestrian amenities, reducing trips using other transit options like microtransit and emerging technologies that maybe have not even been conjured up yet, and enhancing the city's rideshare van pool, the TMA, Association. So all of these together, when combined, when used in combination, can help move the needle, like we say, to reducing both vehicle trip magnitude as well as trip distances through the area. Next slide. And thinking about things regionally, as we've talked about, the connection to the freeway, as we envision this plan, our study will include evaluating the connections, of course, to the 134 and the 210, and thinking about how to decelerate and slow down the traffic that's ending where the freeway ends at this project. So different options for that, and different options for how to directionally sign the freeway as traffic approaches this area, to really discourage and alleviate cut-through traffic, which happens today, of course, but alleviate the directional signage and work with Caltrans as an iterative process, working with Caltrans to discuss where it is most appropriate to terminate the 210 freeway, for example, north of Union Street, because obviously right now, south of Union Street to the south is the relinquishment area, but we're working with Caltrans to discuss where that could be done, potentially north. And one of these tools, next slide, is, like I mentioned, a potential roundabout design. The one shown here is shown north of Walnut, that intercepts and slows down freeway traffic coming off 210 eastbound, 210 westbound, and really presents a gateway and a sign to traffic coming through that this is you're entering an urban area. It's a gateway. So this is still to be designed with the currently shown. It's below grade, below the Maple overcrossing. But I'm going to hand it over to Vaughn, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the gateway and connection.
Thanks, Deepak. I think it also should just be mentioned that the relinquishment plan did not come with the full disentanglement of all the spaghetti that's out there. So this is an opportunity to really make this a much more pedestrian or human-centered connection in the rest of the city. So we get rid of all of that, as much of that spaghetti as possible. But really a great gateway opportunity. So everybody who leaves the freeway is slowed down to 25 miles an hour, entering a city as they get to this roundabout and move back into the southern portion of the relinquishment area, our study area. Next. And then what that allows us to do is to really, at the upper level, start to rethink that whole northern area. So again, this is not currently in the relinquishment area, but we do think Holly Street is an important access in the city. It leads you directly to City Hall. There's been a lot of interest in bringing that through and being able to connect to it in a better way. Right now, it sort of peters out at the edge of the freeway on South Pasadena. We want to bring that to a great place within the city at the northern end of the stub. So that's what you're seeing here. And redo the ramp that is Maple Street. Right now, it's really an off-ramp, and even though it has a small bikeway and sidewalk on it, it's not really a great, comfortable environment, and we want to take that back, basically, and make that a pedestrian connection. And then also think about connections westward. How do we get down to the Arroyo? Are the opportunities to really make Holly Street continue all the way west through the city? And just to give you an idea on the next slide of what we mean by take back this connection, on the left-hand side, you see the existing condition of that off-ramp on Maple Street. There are many ways we could do this, but you could think of it as your Pasadena High Line. It's the way to really get you back, take back that space and make it more pedestrian-oriented. So we're going to be looking at this as being pedestrian-only or pedestrian bikes, or having one lane of mixed-use traffic on it, perhaps, so that we can have cars there and give you a sense of security and a sense of place along there at all times of the day. But it gives you an example of how we're thinking of repurposing some of these elements. Next slide. And as you come into this transit facility, if we can work with Caltrans and the agencies, this is to Jennifer's example of the layer cake. This is our layer cake of transit. On the lower level would be all those uses and things that we do not want to come into the city. So the regional buses and all the interface with the regional system would happen at the lower level. So that's the bottom part of this slide. And if you think of layering on top of that, then it gives us the freedom to have an urban plaza or a place above that really has some discrete ways of getting down below and connecting vertically. There might be some shops, there might be some amenities that serve those functional aspects of changing mobilities from a bicycle to a bus, etc., or from a local bus on the surface to a regional bus below, but making that an amenitized urban space. And then thinking about private sector development that might happen on top of that. So whether those are cultural uses or whether there's a residential or office uses, there's a third level of rate of development that we want to make sure that if we're thinking about this with the agencies, that we want to make them be partners in that project moving forward. So this has got sort of a life of its own at the northern end, but this is how we think about it as a layer cake, so we can really get some added value out of intercepting this freeway earlier. And there will go some questions.
Okay, so again, we have some questions for the panelists. And I'm going to ask David Granis to take on question number 1, which is, as we plan for a future with a wide range of transportation choices, what should be our top priority to ensure people can move easily and efficiently each day?
Thank you, Brenda. Whoa, good morning. I think that, my big takeaway, in many past lives, I was a planning and transportation deputy to a member of the LA City Council eons ago, and I got to work on the '84 Olympic Games. The city played a pretty proactive role in preparing, and as you recall, those of us that were around then, there wasn't anything in the way of rail transit on the ground. It was buses and streets. In fact, the athletes rode to the games in school buses. And we as attendees went to these events in RTD buses, the old Rapid Transit District. What I learned from that is the most important thing that we can do is provide as many choices as possible. That's what happened during '84. We provided lots of choices for the aerospace employees in the 405 corridor, for downtown workers, for schools, for every aspect of daily connectivity in Los Angeles. That big picture was lots of different choices, flex work. Deliveries were done at different hours. So as we think about this, we need to think in terms of more, not less. Deepak talked a lot about, in some of his slides, a lot about how those choices line up. But that's really the most important element, and it may sound generic, but it's critically important. The more choices, the more connectivity, the more accessibility.
Thanks, David. And for our next question, I'm going to turn to Vaughn again. Vaughn, how do you envision the reconnection of the 710 Stub through transit and circulation?
Well, I think, as we've all mentioned, it's about the reconnecting. And I think if we provide the choices and the options to walk across the ditch through paseos and courtyards and gardens and terraces, or whether we're on a new street that is a complete street where you feel comfortable as a pedestrian alongside vehicles and other uses, I think that's our priority, is first at a very local level, being able to make it walkable and pleasant and beautiful. I think we don't talk about beauty often enough, I think, in urban design, but you have beautiful streets in Pasadena, and we shouldn't overlook that. There is just a legacy of doing beautiful neighborhood streets, and this should be a whole new inventory of those beautiful neighborhood streets, whether they're east, west, or north, south, that you should want to be on. And then, whether you've come from a little bit further away and you're using a bus to get from maybe A to B to C, etc., that you see this as a destination, as a place to go to, and not just a place to go through, that you would come and spend the morning here and you would actually hardly anybody I've ever seen walk from the Norton Simon to a restaurant in downtown. They do that short trip that David's saying we should try and get rid of. And so if there's an opportunity to have a shuttle that connects the dots again and takes you from a museum or cultural use down Colorado Boulevard, or you can park your car and get off transit and you can get to the Huntington Hospital, etc. We want to make those easy choices, easy options that today are just very unfriendly, and you have to probably get in your car to drive 2 blocks when you decide to go from one event during a day to another. So we want to make this a place that really is alive with lots of choices.
Okay, thank you, Vaughn. And one final question right now for our panelists, and this one will go to Kate. What does reconnection besides the streets and the freeway mean to you, and why is this important?
So we've been talking. Can you hear me? It's not on. Got it. So we've been talking a lot about mobility and the form making that mobility sort of engenders, right? And where we started today was also with restorative justice. So I think this question really kind of gets to this sense that we've heard in many of our community meetings and in many conversations with you in the room. And thank you all for being here again. It's amazing, as well as our advisory group, about this kind of intangible form of social cohesion and reconnection, and about a recognition that we all live in community together. And so I think that's another piece or a layer of what the aspiration and the vision is for this location, is it is actually to kind of reconnect that city at its most fundamental form. So that's I think, pretty important. So.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. And if we can go to our next slide and have you get your phones out. Keep those phones ready. The question we'd like you to respond to this time is, when we talk about reconnection beyond just physical places, what comes to mind to you? Would it be A, places and spaces where I feel welcome? B, sharing common values and history? C, remembering something that was lost? D, all of the above? Or if it's something else, if you could write it on your card and we will collect those items from you, those cards from you. And our tally is taking place over there.
Yep. At the moment, places and spaces where I feel welcome is 62% in the lead. The next highest is all of the above with 30%. Remembering something that was lost is at 20% right now. And sharing common values and histories is 17% as the numbers come in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deepak, for reading those for us. We're going to move up to our next section, which involves human connections. And if we can go to the next slide, there we are. And I'm going to turn that over to Kate to walk us through this section.
And you can actually advance the next one. Great. So we spent some time, as you guys know, talking about mobility and the form making. And so this next piece, and we'll have a few slides where we'll kind of walk you block by block of a framework where you can start to think about land uses and think about what's the stuff that's going in the stub. So in April, we came to the community meeting. Hopefully some of you were there on April 12th. It's seared into my memory, maybe not so much yours, with a series of cardboard models that allowed us to mix and match different forms of development up and down those 10 blocks of the stub. We brought you high-rises, we brought you multifamily buildings, we brought you townhouses, we brought you parks, and we had lots of conversations with all of you at that event to try to understand, what did people want to see here? We also conducted a survey. And so, like Goldilocks, not too big and not too small, what the design team has done is tried to do some stress testing around land uses to start to answer the questions that I know you all have, which is about how much is going to go in here, how many new people are going to be here, what kinds of new programs is the city going to plan for here. So you can see on the orange box up there, there's a lot of goals for residential, and we heard a lot of comments about affordability. And so what our stress tests look at right now is a unit range from about 1,700 units to about 2,400 units. And across 10 blocks, that looks kind of like Westgate, a variety of different Westgates and different configurations. We, of course, start with affordability as a baseline, and then we'll move into more affordable units and the depth of affordability as we go forward. We also heard about employment goals. So really wanting to have spaces and places for jobs, for different community programs, as well as in the city at large, the economic development strategies and what Pasadena is known for around institutional uses, around innovation and education spaces. So on that side of it, what our stress tests look at is about 800,000 units of gross square feet to 1.3 million. That's not going to mean a lot to all of you here. You don't have those gross square footage numbers, I'm sure, off the top of your mind. But that really does look like an urban environment, sort of the extended downtown. So from that, if we go to the next slide, what does that mean? At this stage, the land uses are very, very flexible, and we want to maintain, as David mentioned earlier, that flexibility. But we do need some structure to hang our ideas off of, right? And so that's what this is showing here. And Vaughn will actually walk you through each of these different kind of neighborhoods. So we can think of land use as creating the building blocks of neighborhoods. And the way we as planners think about it, and that's something that Jennifer spoke about earlier, is we try to look at adjacencies. We try to look at what's there today and make a logical handshake with that type of use. So what we have at the northern end of the stub, we're calling the gateway or partnering location. That's this mobility piece that we just talked to you about. That could be something like a cultural destination or hospitality or a commercial use, a use that's not really going to be overly impacted by being right next to the freeway. Just south of that, we have this, what we're calling this civic, cultural, commercial emphasis. That's right around Colorado. We all know Colorado is Pasadena's signature street. We know there's a historic district there. There's 2 to 3 story buildings. So in our vision framework, what we're thinking about is this is a mixed urban environment that builds off of that signature street and what we see in old Pasadena. And that the yellow really designates residential. That is actually really close and adjacent to where we are today. There's a host of different multifamily buildings there. This is something that we're conceived of as being this urban village. And that's a place where we can consolidate some of that urban living and lifestyles within that part of the study area. And then at the end, at the south end, south of Del Mar, again, another little neighborhood, that's one that we're thinking about, okay, well, what's next to here? We have this live work spaces, we have arts programming, we have research spaces, and we have healthcare uses actually associated with the Huntington Hospital. So that's something that we're thinking about, hey, if we need to allocate some space for like a campus-like environment for R&D, innovation spaces, that could go south of Del Mar. And so that's what we're calling this innovation and learning environments. One thing to note, and we'll talk about that, is that the whole site slopes down. And so we start at a higher elevation, and we actually slope down in elevation when we get to the south. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Vaughn.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Just to put a little bit of color on some of these notions that Kate has talked about. So Colorado Boulevard, this again is a very high level of what if, and a what if that we want to probably get a reaction to. If we thought about Colorado Boulevard as being a great civic space at that point, something that's akin to the character of an urban civic space like City Hall is, you could imagine from an image like this, so if you could step back from the street wall, the edge of those buildings, you could get great vistas of the mountains. There'd be an opportunity to really see yourself on Colorado Boulevard in the context of the mountains. So we're imagining one of the options or one of the ideas could be to widen the street, open up the street here, create a beautiful public space that could be used on weekends, could be used off-peak hours, could be a great gathering place for the city, framed by buildings that are primarily 2-story at the lower level, and taller buildings maybe set back beyond that as you move away from the street. The next image is, if you can move to the next slide, it's a place where maybe the community can gather, where we can remember, celebrate spaces, celebrate events in the city. As I mentioned, we want perhaps the flavor of this should be akin to what we have at City Hall, with these beautiful gardens, large mature trees be able to grow, great urban spaces that you can celebrate, perhaps some beautiful murals that celebrate and remember the people and the places that were here before us. Places to have farmers markets and really open this up for art fairs, all the great cultural events that we might want to have, and we don't have space for on that main street. So at the time when you do use it, you would divert traffic around to Green Street and Union, which are already one-way streets, and so you could really capture this for those great events. And the Rose Bowl Parade would still continue through this space. But the bottom image there is really just a contemporary image of people watching and cafes and dining, and so that could be a complement to what you already have on Colorado. We don't see it as lots of shops per se, but just really something that complements what you have in downtown and grows the capacity for downtown. The next image gives you a little bit of a sense, if you can move to the next slide, of the scale of what the space might be like. So the first one on the left-hand side is really showing you a space there that is just like the gardens at City Hall. So next time you visit City Hall, spend some time in that beautiful courtyard and garden with those beautiful 4 big live oak trees and the arcades around the edges, a beautiful shaded personal space where you could imagine it being the scale and size of that. The one on the right-hand side is a little bit larger. It intercepts a little bit with what we think of as the greenway. That might be the west side of the street with the new boulevard. So more garden-like experience perhaps as you move further west, but something larger. And these are all the kinds of things and questions we'd want you to be able to give us some feedback on as we go through the next phase of the design. So we're going to be elaborating on these, and we'll bring these back to you as we move forward. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an image of what we're thinking in the back of our minds for the civic sort of celebrating Colorado Boulevard. Think of it as a great place. In the central area, this is where, again, whether it's a greenway or the gardens and terraces, we introduce a lot more park-like environment. We'll be able to build down and step down and terrace down into the ditch that we have today. So we're not going to fill the whole thing with parking. We're not going to fill the whole thing with dirt. We want to take advantage of the topography that's there, and you could maybe have a series of beautiful parks and gardens that are nested in with the residential buildings that Kate mentioned. A little bit of a sense of the scale of those buildings in the next slide, if we can move on to that, is really, we want to make sure that we're working with current development patterns, so building typologies that we see around here. We don't want to make it difficult for developers to do things, but we do want to make them well behaved. So we'll work with you and Jennifer and her team to make sure that the guidelines and constraints that come with specific plans are built into the anticipated future the designs for this. So we get well-behaved buildings, we get well-crafted public open spaces, we have the right scale of buildings where they meet the street and setbacks for those spaces, so we can get this gardens and terraces and some breathing room for the community in those beautiful neighborhoods. And the next slide, and then I'll pass it on to Kate, I think, with the last district. But, when we think about the ways through, other than the streets, there are these beautiful paseos. So this is just a sketch that says, all right, between two developments that we might have, we might require an easement, a way for people to get through, get a glimpse across what was the ditch in the past to the other side, and a sense of where you're going. These could be wonderful places of discovery. You have them all over the city. All your alleyways in Old Pasadena have been redesigned, and they become these beautiful walking spaces. And we can require those, we can encourage those in all the developments that we move forward on. So you could imagine a replication of One Colorado, those beautiful courtyards and gardens and spaces that you see in that instance, being replicated in a myriad of different ways to allow you to have many ways through this site. And the plan in the next image is really just gives you these two images it can be applied in both instances. There would be the gardens and terraces. We would try to get more of a linear garden space in the center that developers would contribute to and the city would work with to get a garden space or a green space within that. So you see South Pasadena on the top of the slide and St. John at the bottom and the green space through the middle. That would be the series of gardens and terraces that we have, with lots of connections and ways to get back up through. The little section in the corner in the bottom there shows you how you would climb up through stairs and terraces up to the upper levels. The next image is really one that shows you that space moved to the west. So it's adjacent to the new boulevard and St. John, creating more of a garden-like experience on the west side, still with lots of gardens and terraces between the residential developments, but really the public right-of-way being able to be built all at once. I think that's the big difference between these two. The gardens and terraces would happen over time with each of the developments as you move through the space because of the nature of where it is in the bottom of the ditch. This would be really at the level of St. John and would be a great urban public realm that would be developed all at once as a new north-south spine.
So we have a few more. If we go to our next slide, it's time for questions again to the panel. And I know the hour is drawing late, so we want to have brief responses to these. And our first question is for Vaughn. Vaughn, what strategies help ensure new developments include affordable housing and community-serving purposes? Community-serving uses.
Thanks. I'm actually going to take this.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I think really I was thinking about this. There's three main ways. I think one, we start with the existing inclusionary zoning program that Pasadena already has that assumes 20% AMI. Or 20% of units at 90% AMI. Then with our restorative justice and our economic consultants, we'll investigate the amount and depth of affordability that can be supported here. And we include that as a recommendation in the vision plan. And thirdly, we need to consider implementation strategies and the scale and location of potential sites for affordable housing developers, and then identify those developers and work with them together as partners in the next phases of this project to make sure that the development strategy fits with their profile.
Okay, Kate, do you want to also take the next question, which is, how does density relate to existing neighborhood character? What neighborhood assets should be considered?
This is a lot of what we did in our discovery phase, and I think a lot of what we talk to our community members about and want to be able to reflect in the vision plan. I think when we talk about assets, we're talking about Norton Simon, we're talking about the Ambassador Auditorium, we're talking about this location we're sitting in here today, as well as schools, and we want to be able to reflect in the vision plan as recommendations how it is that we leverage those assets in this new neighborhood. I think with density, one of the things you heard Vaughn talk about is a consideration and a sensitivity to the existing historic neighborhoods, to the types of forms of development that exist already in Pasadena, as well as West Pasadena that is generally lower scale, single family. And when we talk about the neighborhood to the south, you'll see how there's a kind of natural buffer through the West Side Boulevard or Greenway, as well as how we're sort of creating a more of a street wall to engage with the downtown portion of Pasadena, sort of buffering West Pasadena while still connecting it and drawing it in.
Thank you, Kate. And it's time for audience participation again. If we go to the next slide. We're interested in what you think. What features or ideas would help us better support reconnection in our community? And do you think that would be A, housing for all, B, commercial spaces and employment opportunities, C, gathering spaces on each block, D, climate-sensitive design for neighborhood buildings, or E, if you have something else, if you could write it on a card for us? So if you can go ahead and do that, and we will watch our poll populate. There is no all of the above option this time.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
It keeps changing, but yes, it keeps fluctuating. Climate sensitive design for neighborhood buildings is, well, it was in the lead at 25%. It's kind of close between gathering spaces on each block and housing for all are also in the 20s.
Nice.
Okay, thank you for that. And we do have, just appreciate you hanging in there with us. We just have a little bit more to get through. Next, we want to move to, if we can go to the next slide, please.
So I just wanted to start off the last district. I already previewed this for you a little bit. So we remember where we are. We're at Del Mar now, and we're looking south. And what's there now is on the slide. That is a Caltrans stormwater pump that takes and cleans the water from the freeway system. And actually, one of the things we learned is actually cleans and detains the water also from West Pasadena and parts of the Central District of Pasadena. So one of the things the project has done, and we need to realize, is this is the lowest and deepest part of the site, and so the water does flow down here. Caltrans has preliminarily agreed to remove this pump, take it out of the stub and put it somewhere else. And we've been working with our civil team to explore in working groups with Caltrans how that might work. It will be a next phase in which we really need to size and plan and locate new pump facilities that would service the City of Pasadena's water uses. And we're really working to coordinate with the overall city water goals and the needs for the Raymond Basin. So if you look at the next slide, that gives us a lot of opportunity to think about water in a very progressive way and to think about water not only as something that we're reusing and recirculating. And the scale of the project actually gives us a lot of different opportunities to think about a system-wide strategy for stormwater to be reused, not only from the those projects that are located in our study area, but also stormwater that's coming onto the site from other parts of the city. So this is an artist's illustration of what that might look like. The buildings there are sort of lining along South Pasadena, and what you're seeing is this kind of activated space and open space that's being designed with water reuse and sustainability in mind. So then the next slide, if you go to the next slide, you can see some images of features that are similar and precedents that we are looking at. The one that says stormwater treatment, that's actually Mission Bay. So one of the things when we say stormwater, it doesn't really, it doesn't sound so glamorous, but actually what you can be doing in California, certainly we don't get a lot of rain, but when we do get rain, we get heavy rain. And so what we want to think about is ways that we use stormwater treatment, places to delay or slow down stormwater and then convey it elsewhere where it can be infiltrated into our aquifers. So this is sort of a picture of how you can actually think about stormwater as a public realm feature. Additionally, we've got some images on here of topography, right? So we talked about terracing. This is going to be a location when we think about this site, as you're standing on St. John, you're actually going to be looking down into a space, looking down into the ditch via a set of stairs or connections, terraces that could be planted or places for people to sit. So that's what that image is on the lower right-hand side. That's actually a park in the Pearl District in Portland that's really beautiful, it actually cleans the city's water, and it's a visual and ecological water system. And then we also have on this image some different green building systems that we've talked about a little bit, and play spaces and active landscape. These are some of these ideas or desired outcomes that we can put in the vision plan, as well as the images and precedents of places that we want to see. So the next slide are two plans. I think we've got both our gardens and terraces and our boulevard and paseos on both on the screen. So you can see how gardens and terraces, this actually has, in this particular scenario, comparatively reduced building footprints here. And it's also really focusing more on the paseo. And you can see here that while we're leaving space for water, what we're doing is we're burying it underground in a series of cisterns. Those cisterns absorb the water, they can delay there, and then it can be removed and again pumped off-site. That allows for lots of active uses on top of them. This can be green, this can be active play spaces, there's lots of opportunities here. On the other side, on boulevards and paseos, there's an opportunity to think about water really specifically as a design feature. And so that means thinking a little bit differently about natural systems, those terraces, even water-based active play spaces. And then I think the next slide gives you a sense of like what that looks like in section. So here you can see on the left-hand side, that's St. John. And so you can see how that slopes down from West Pasadena, and you see the little red people walking there. And then you can also see how it terraces down into the ditch. And then what we're looking at beyond is actually one of these paseo bridge crossings that are at street level. So they're sort of above you. And you can see where the building is on South Pasadena, right? It's lower. So you're really taking advantage of the topography and creating a kind of different experience and neighborhood that could be designed with sustainability in mind, with partners who are engaging with you in the design of that public realm. And there's actually a fair amount of different ways that it could be treated. And what we just want to do is we really want to put forward in that vision plan the sustainable water reuse be coordinated with the public realm strategy here between Del Mar to California. So I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Kate. And just a few brief questions for the panel now. The first one, I think Kate is going to take. What ideas should we include in the vision plan to lead the way in green infrastructure and managing stormwater?
I feel like I just answered that question.
Then we'll go to question 2. In what ways will this project help move the city closer to its sustainability goals?
I think there's a lot of ways. We talked about water, but one of the other things that we're hearing, and we've been meeting with David Reyes' team, is really about their energy goals. And I think what we can do in the vision plan is get ready for net zero feasibility, which means we have a sense, we know how much energy could be used. We have a generalized sense of how much renewables could be produced on the buildings that we're placing in here. And we actually have found, as part of the infrastructure investigation we're doing, some places where we could allocate for battery storage. So I think at this phase of the project, it's important to keep that end point in mind. We know we want to be doing really high performance buildings. We want to be thinking about energy. We have to create the regulatory framework next as part of Jennifer's team to enforce a kind of development that can make those things happen. And we need to be sensitive about the economics of those things. Whenever we push forward on really progressive kinds of energy or buildings, it does cost money. So that's one thing just to keep in mind. In the long term, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. So it saves money in the long term. We'll just end it with that. But we will go to our next slide where, again, we have a few questions for you to respond to. And here we're asking, what kinds of public features or spaces would you like to see in this area in the future? A, would you like to see interactive fountains or a splash zone? B, pools with native plant and water cleaning habitat. C, rain gardens and bioswales along with new streets. D, ponds and pools. E, no visible water or active green space. And if you have F something else, if you could kindly write that on a card. So as we watch the numbers populate, and again, from my angle, I really can't see it. But it looks like
rains and gardens. Well, no, before that, pools with native plant and rains and gardens are the top numbers. There are 68% and 66% are the two highest.
Pools with native plant and water cleaning habitat and rain gardens and bioswales along with new streets looks like they're neck and neck. So thank you for that. And I promise we are bringing this home now, because if we go to our next slide, we're talking about bringing all of these ideas together. How are we going to do that? Because we've talked about, I think you'd agree, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. And so for this, I want to turn to our planning director, Jennifer Page, to start bringing these ideas together for us and talk about next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. Yes, we're almost done, so thank you for your patience. We're going to start to synthesize everything. And so really, it's where are we at with next steps and what you're starting to see in some of the workshops that we're doing and some of the presentations before the land use subcommittee is the economic piece of this. And I think we've tried to be very clear that infrastructure here doesn't exist. And so this is one of the challenges that we have. It's an opportunity and, again, also a challenge that there is no infrastructure here. And so what are we going to do about that? How are we going to pay for that? What type of modeling is needed? And really, to be able to properly guide our decisions and our decision makers, we need to know what is all of this going to cost. And then as we go into the development phase of this and we're able to partner and we bring in developers and we work on different projects, what are the opportunities there for the costs and the cost sharing and how we can see this work? How can we integrate in the sustainability and the climate resiliency in this from the ground up? We have a really unique opportunity to do that here, and how we can take advantage of some of the really cool ideas that are out there for different ways to do streets and greening and the stormwater capture. But we need to model that and look at the cost. And so that's really where we're at with the next steps with this economic modeling that we're starting to talk about at some of our workshops.
Thank you, Jennifer. And if we can go to the next slide, one of our constraints is going to be funding. We have a blank slate. We're starting, as Jennifer mentioned, with no infrastructure. There are no streets. There are no storm drains. There are no electrical power lines in the area. So how are we going to pay for this? And we are very early in the process of exploring that because right now we don't even know how much we're going to need. But just to walk you through very quickly some of our possible finance tools that we could use. One would be tax increment financing. Another would be a special tax assessment or districts for that area. Another could be general fund financing. This is probably our least available because our city's general fund is already pretty well allocated towards funding other things such as police and fire and libraries to an extent, public works, some of those things. We can also look to get grants from other levels of government, state grants or federal grants. Quite frankly, right now, in this environment, federal grants probably will not be available given the state and the atmosphere at our federal level. Another would be impact fees that we would assess on the area. And some of you may be familiar with some of the impact fees we charge for other things in our city. But the main thing we want to leave you here with is that we do need to develop a financing strategy. We are working very closely with a consultant called Cosmot. Some of you may be familiar with them, to help them identify ways and tools that we could potentially use to finance this. We're a little bit, it may seem early because we don't know what we're going to put in, so we don't know what the cost will be, but we are working on costing that out and also looking at those potential financing tools. We did have one more set of panel questions, but I think I'm going to take a little executive privilege because I'm the one with the microphone and they can't stop me. And instead, we're going to, in some of the time that we have left, just respond to some of the questions that you've asked. We've pulled some of these questions and there were amazing questions and we won't be able to get to all of them. But I do want to we did want to know what you want to know. And we've tried to be clear, but not clear enough. And so you've asked us some questions. And so let's start. So this first question has to do with transportation. Where will through traffic go? Great question. Will it be redirected to Orange Grove Boulevard, Lake, or any other street? So who would like to take that one? Deepak, we're going to give that
Yes, I can start with that one. I expected that one today. The short answer is we're studying that. That's what we're studying right now. Where traffic would go, it's all depending on our design concepts and how we like improve and enhance with the tools that I mentioned for reducing driving trips. Seems like it's on very well. Transit connectivity, multimodal, and with an understanding of land use, not just in our area, but modeling the regional area. And so that's, we have the tools to do that, and that's what we're doing for this project. So I don't have an answer as far as where it will all go. No, but
apologies. So our next question, I'm going to combine two questions, and I'll read the two questions, and you'll kind of see why I'm combining them. One question asks, what is the impact of a new California boulevard on high density within a half of a mile of a metro stop? And the second one is, how will the recently approved SB 79 affect this project? And if you don't know, SB 79 was approved by our legislature, our state legislature, just last night. And what it allows or preempts our ability as a city in terms of housing around within a half a mile of a transit stop. And as you know, we have 6 metro stops in our city. So I think these two are related. One is talking about density within a half mile of the metro stop, and the other is SB 79 and how it could affect this project. So I'm going to give David Granis the first one. What's the impact of a new California boulevard on high density within a half mile of a metro stop?
Gosh, and I was going to take the second one.
Oh, you know what? Bonus, you get both.
I mean, I think obviously we have a light rail system, and we need a much probably more robust, interconnected. We talked about multimodal, but it's really interconnecting what we have with other modes, new modes. Deepak talked a little bit about that earlier. To really make that functionally work properly. Yes, density at transit, we have some examples of that right here, is functional and works. There are other examples, around the region, but we need to interconnect those destinations both regionally and locally. And think of the Burbank Airport, think of, from a regional standpoint, locally, Civic Center, MedTech, ed tech, all the various things that we have going on in the city need to be better connected. We have two amazing educational institutions in PCC and Caltech. Having those connected better. So I would just say, in terms of density around transit, that's just a piece of the pie. That's kind of a silo that you have to expand your thinking a little bit and think more holistically about how do we connect all those various destinations to that to make that density and transit functional. The second piece on SB 79, I know there were some last minute changes. I've not read the last minute changes, but I do know that there are differentiations between the subway system, the light rail system, and other forms of transit. And so I think we need to look carefully. My answer would be, I think we need to look very carefully how we cluster and aggregate, whatever happens in the ditch. I lovingly call it the ditch. Whatever happens, bless you, whatever happens in that area, and just make sure that we're not impacting existing neighborhoods unduly. I do think that those gradations, though, of subway, light rail, and then other, it's really important that we understand the specifics of that before we leap too quickly.
Thank you. And I'll just ask our planning director if she wanted to say anything else about the impact of SB 79. She's been following this very closely.
Yes, we were vocally against SB 79. We wrote a few letters and have done a lot of outreach against SB 79. And that's not because we're afraid of density and we're not afraid of growth, but we like to target our growth where we plan for it. And we spend a lot of years working in the community on building our plans. And we talked about the general plan, and we talk about the specific plans, and we put a concerted effort into targeting growth. We target it near transit. We target it where their services are. And in a built-up community like Pasadena, when you have 6 A-line stations, when you go a half mile out, you're getting into lower density neighborhoods. You're getting into historic neighborhoods. And that's not where we plan for our density. We plan for our density to be closer to those light rail stations. We plan it in the Central District and other areas. And we plan for growth. And like I say, we're not afraid of housing and we're not afraid of density, but we want it to be in areas where we feel it's the least impactful to the entire community, where there's services, where there's jobs and there's connections to transit and employment. And when the state comes in and usurps that to a certain extent, it's a challenge and it's frustrating. But what I've always said is as we go about our work and we're working on these specific plans, is we have to plan for what we feel is best for our community. Not every project is going to be the highest density project. Not every project is going to take advantage of a bill. They're there and they're options, but often we still have projects that conform to our plans. So it's really important that we continue to do our planning and we do the work that we want in Pasadena. We're coming up with objective design standards right now. They're going to be going to the Planning Commission in October, and they're going to be at the City Council before the end of the year. And those are going to be applicable to these high density projects. And we've been working on those for almost 3 years. So it's a lot of work that we're doing to try to pull out what is important to us in design and context as these bigger projects come in and to plan for them. But we have to continue to do our good work. And most of the projects that are built will be to our standards. And you'll have a few here and there that don't meet the standards, but we'll continue to work through that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our planning director isn't used to applause, so thank you. We do have a few more questions because these are such great questions, and we do regret that we can't get to all of them. And David Reyes, I'm going to ask you to come back. There's a chair, if you could come back to the stage as well. This next question has to do with restorative justice, and it asks, since the state of California originally took the land, shouldn't California pay for any and all restorative justice? And that is a great question. Also getting applause. I know it's not for me. So I will start off, and then I'm going to let David finish up with this one. But part of what I will say is at the federal level recognized, what was done to us by the state in terms of building this freeway. This was a national thing that was happening. This happened in a lot of cities in our nation. And at the federal government level, they recognized this. And the federal government had, past tense had, not has, had a program called Reconnecting Communities. And we actually named this project after that. And there were dollars available where the federal government was allotting funding to help communities reconnect and repair the harm that freeways had done. We were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to apply and receive a $2 million planning grant in that program. But if we were further along and if that program were to continue, we actually would have been able to receive funding for construction and for implementation. But as you know, there has been a contraction at our federal level under this administration, and the Reconnecting Communities program is gone. So that is no longer an opportunity. So now the question said, what about the state level? Shouldn't they be forced to pay for it? In the relinquishment process, we were given the land back, and we also were given, I believe, David, it was $5 million. And that was really all that the state gave us. But I'm going to ask David to take the second part of that question. Shouldn't the state be required to pay for any and all restorative justice?
And I think it goes beyond the restorative justice. I do. It's not on.
There you go.
Here we go. Okay. Thank you. And thanks, Brenda. I think this goes actually beyond restorative justice. I do think that the state. So, yeah, is that better? Yeah. I think it goes beyond restorative justice in terms of what's happened here, in terms of the decisions by the state and the federal government to expand the highway system throughout California, throughout the United States. Brenda talked about the $5 million. That was for maintenance. I mean, I think we've probably already spent that twice over. So it was really nothing. And the fact that we did get the land back is a big deal. We are one of the few cities, if maybe not the only one, to have the relinquishment done the way it was done. But I do think that the state should continue to be involved with us. We should continue to be involved in active discussions with both Caltrans and whatever other state agencies do exist. Brenda talked about the federal government. I know that Long Beach received $35 million from the federal government for infrastructure. And while this current administration doesn't seem to be interested in programs like this, I don't know that this administration is going to be around forever. And I think that I do think it's such an important project because, as was mentioned, this is not the only one that's happened. It's happened all around the country, and we're going to continue to work. David's been working very closely with folks in Washington that he still has connections to, and we need to continue doing that. So yes, the state does need to take some responsibility for what's happened, and I think that the federal government does as well.
Thank you, David. Our next question has to do with sustainability. Does the development plan include systematic methods to passively integrate heat resiliency features and energy efficiency features? And I'm going to ask maybe Kate to take that one, or Kate, Vaughn, who wants that one? David? I don't know.
I'll start. Again, this is not this one. Let's talk loud. Can you hear me? Yes. Sustainability, passive integration. I think, we have a great opportunity here because we have the 50-acre district and we have lots of wonderful streets and infrastructure. So, yes, I think whether we're planting trees and a continuous tree canopy, whether we're encouraging breezes through these spaces, whether we're capturing solar, whether we're recycling water, it can all be done passively. But I think passive is sort of a misnomer. We're going to be using those as an active participation in that natural system that we need to bring into all the public spaces, into all the buildings that we use and integrate it. So that's my sort of beginning on it. If Kate wanted to add to that, Kate talked a little bit about the water and how we're going to be reusing water. I think that's also part of it. We can cool through those systems. We can capture through wind tunnel effects and bring cooler air from higher elevations in the air into this public spaces. So lots of wonderful things that are local to Pasadena and a microclimate as well.
One of the things
louder.
one of the things we're learning as part of our sustainability team at Perkins Eastman, and we've signed the 2030 Climate Challenge as the architecture firm that we work for, is we actually have been doing some early climate modeling on the site to look at the days and the increase in numbers of days of extreme heat. So one of the things we can include in the vision plan is that assessment and provide some performance-based measures and guidance around how to site buildings to really take advantage of how we want to address wind and climatic conditions, as well as where the sun is, to make sure we're providing shade and shaded spaces in the public realm. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a preliminary assessment to provide a kind of implementation action plan, as it were, for net zero feasibility for the site itself. And that's really a private side developer on the building side. So I think, yes, we can take advantage of the scale of this site, the district level qualities of sustainability, which are really unique, and also load up and look at best practices that are happening around California to make sure that those go forward in the vision plan.
Brenda, if I could just add also, I think it's important. Yes, the developer is going to be responsible for some sustainability aspects of the building, whether it's green building, we've talked about in this community, being LEED certified, whatever standards are going to exist are going to be important. But the city is also going to invest. PWP will be investing in municipal scale solar that will help the community, that will lower costs eventually, and will be really, really important to meet some of our zero emission, our zero carbon targets. So we are thinking about that. There's a lot of rooftop spaces that we're looking at, and there will be an investment by the city as well.
Thank you, David. And I think we have I have a stack, but I'm going to do one more question before we break and begin our more informal session of Q&A. This question, I think, is a great one. When is a realistic time frame for the project to break ground? I know, I see. Let's see, Jennifer, would you like to take that one, Ms. Planning Director?
Major all funding starting with.
Maybe Jennifer and Vaughn would like to take this one.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard question. I think we have realistically and in full transparency a few more years of getting through this. We have to vision. We have to do specific plans. We have to do environmental documents. So we have a few more years of getting everything aligned with our planning, and then figuring out how things are going to be paid for. Dave probably has a few things to add to that. I would guess maybe in 10 years. What do you think? Am I being realistic? I think I'm a realist. I'm in between an optimist and a pessimist, but I would think 10 years we might see something happening.
I'm more optimistic. But I think, to add to what you said, besides the city process and all the things the city is doing right now, Dave Reyes talked about what PWP is doing, et cetera. So all that gets integrated into the planning process. The thing that we want to look at is parallel processing the spaghetti takedown. That is a separate process that dovetails with the planning process, but we have to, as the city initiates the planning process in the next several months, what we have to start doing is initiating what will be a city-led. There's two ways to do this. You can have Caltrans lead, or you can have the city lead it. My recommendation is the city lead it. But we start that process in parallel with the planning process, so that we're not doing things sequentially. We're doing things literally, cumulatively, and that should speed up the ability. I don't have a crystal ball. I just am more of an optimist, but that's why we did the relinquishment so quickly. But I do think that it's really important as we look at. It's not just the planning process. We have to prepare this site. Kate talked about water. That pumping station's got to be replaced. There's a series of things that need to happen. And as long as we're cognizant of that and prepared for that and strategically aligned to make sure that we have those work streams flowing, I think it just makes the site more ready more quickly.
I'm going to pile on.
part of what the city also has for Metro is Measure Our funding. And rather than just spend that money, we want to make sure that it gets spent in this region, in this area, in an appropriate way so that we're not putting good money after bad, and we do what we can now in anticipation of what will come in the future. So whether it's a bike lane or a pedestrian improvement or a bulb out at a corner, all of those projects will now be tied to the success in the future of this plan. So we want to do things once, do it right. And so I think anything that you see happen in this neighborhood needs to go through the sort of the lens, be seen through the lens of this vision plan. And so they all become these little pieces of incremental implementation. It's not as if any big city block is going to happen overnight anyway. So it's a lot of smaller incremental moves. Some of the big moves with Caltrans and the freeway, moving the water pump that Kate talked about from the south end to the north end. There is an ongoing study, and there's slowly getting buy-in that is actually a project that is going to be initiated. So all of those things they're in the works. They're starting to move. And so you should see every increment of progress as being part of this vision from now on out.
Thank you, Vaughn. And with that, I think we're about ready to wrap. I know that we've presented a lot of information, and we have a lot of cards and a lot of questions that we will probably be able to respond to via our website. And Vaughn is looking at me because he wants to say one more thing.
Because I did mention about Westgate properties here and lots of the examples that we have next door. And so just to remind everybody, there is a neighborhood right here that, is a big project, and it has beautiful walkways through it. So if you really want to see what we could begin to look like in the future, walk across the street. There's a pharmacy across the way. We want neighborhood serving retail like that on the blocks. We want beautiful shaded walks. That has a parking deck below, so there's lessons to be learned from that. Essentially, it's a shallow ditch. They've got parking in and buildings above it. So lots of what we're talking about in a grander, bigger way is happening right across the street. So just to remind everybody, you have lots of these elements within the city already, and it's incumbent upon you that when you see something beautiful and wonderful that you want us to think about, bring it to us so we know it's out there and that's what you aspire to. So Westgate right out here. Go for a walk.
Thank you, Vaughn. I want to thank, first of all of you for coming out today and for being curious and concerned about your community and the steps we are taking to make something great out of that ditch. I also wanted to again thank Friendship Pasadena Church. Thank you for allowing us. Thank you for opening the doors of your beautiful edifice. And allowing us to be here. I want to also thank Wendy Macias, our senior project manager for the city. Wendy really coordinated everything involved in this meeting. I also want to thank the folks upstairs who don't get a lot of recognition. First, I'd like to thank Friendship's IT team and their media team who are up there helping us with all of their computers and their equipment and the AV side of it. And finally, I'd like to thank our own Pasadena media who is here filming for us and allowing us to be here. So thank you all for coming, but we do want to invite you over to the galley to look at some boards, or if you can we're going to invite the panel members to go over there and be available to talk to you one-on-one, or if you should corner them before they get that far, that would be the case too. And I see one person with their hand up. One quick question. Thank you so much. On the question cards, we have information on our website, and we have a QR code where you can do that. You can go on the city's website and look for 710 Reconnecting Communities, and that will also drive you to the information of how to reach us. And you're being given a card now. And I also want to add that We have, as we've mentioned, the 710 Advisory Group. They meet once a month. Their regular meeting date is the third Wednesday of every month, 6:30 in City Hall. During the month of September, however, they're going to have a special meeting, so they won't be meeting next Wednesday. I believe they're going to be meeting on the 24th. But please come to the regular meetings that are happening about the details of all this information that is being discussed. And again, thank you again for coming. Please hang out a little bit. We have I think we have a little bit more. We might have a few more donuts left and some coffee. Have some snacks and talk to us some more. We really appreciate getting this feedback from you, and it will be incorporated into the project. Thank you so much.